By the way, I'm thinking you probably don't want to show this to young people because you'll scare them away from marriage.
Well, you are watching Adventures in One Love, and we are your hosts,
Greg.
And I'm Lydia, and we are joined by some very dear friends. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Andrea Balauat. This is my husband, John.
And I'm John Balauat. Be here.
Well, we know you're married because you're Mr. and Mrs.
Yes.
You've come to that conclusion. You're like, yes, I can answer. Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Well, we have been married almost 25 years. It'll be 25 years this coming May. We have one daughter, Zoe, who is going to be 20 this year. God has really put us together. We have no doubt that God put us together, and we have such a unique story of how God did that. There was no denying it, and so that just was kind of one of the things that kept us through the difficult times that came.
But every time I hear you say that, it makes me happy, but then it also causes me to question, like, but how do you know? So for somebody who's like me, how did you know that God put you together?
That's on you.
It's on me.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have asked her out if it wasn't for God. We both got saved around the time we met each other, and I don't know if I'm pretty sure I told you. So
we're all going to be learning through this.
Yeah.
Right.
Interested in dating when I met her. Okay, so I did tell you.
You
okay.
told me that.
Was not interested in dating. I had a bad relationship, just got out, and I was hungry. I went to a restaurant. I saw her serving, and I heard God audibly saying, ask her out. This is your wife. I asked her out. It all went uphill from there. I'm not going to say downhill, but it sounds bad. But then it was a whole bunch of confirmations. Now I can no longer say that it wasn't God. I'm for sure that we were supposed to be married.
Andrea, you have a very sweet version of this too.
Well, I work, like he said, I worked in a restaurant, a fast food restaurant. I was working the drive-through, and so he came through the drive-through and asked me out, and I told him no. I worked from 10 at night to 6 in the morning, so I would have several guys. I was pretty cute back then, they would come through and and they would ask me out, and I'm like, no, I don't date customers. And so when he asked me out, I was like, nope, I don't date customers. So he asked for my phone number, didn't do that either. But there was just something about him. He was pretty cute too. And so, he asked, he's like, well, can I give you my number then? And I said, okay, I'll take your number, and I took his number and I never called him back. And then like a week later, I'm working again, and they're like, you have a phone call in the office. And so I go in there and, answer the phone, and it's him. And he tells me, he's like, you probably don't remember me, but I still want to go out with you. And I was just like, wow, this guy is, serious. He's not some drunk guy that's going to come in and ask me out and forget about me, like he's kind of interested, And so, from then I was like, I was intrigued that he would pursue me at that level, And
so you've been married 25 years this May, and it's been wedded bliss the whole time.
I know.
No.
No, I mean, we have had some wonderful times, and now I think it's pretty great.
Yeah.
But we've also had some deep, dark times. And during those times, we didn't like each other. We didn't love each other. We didn't want this marriage. We didn't even believe that God had truly put us together. We doubted that because we were in a hard time. And it was only through God, really working on each one of us, I think individually, that we were able to, recognize that he was the author of our relationship and he was the one who orchestrated it all. And as he did the healing in each one of us, we were able to come back and rebuild something in our marriage and make it even more beautiful than it was before.
And now I've heard several couples talk about, having issues and like put a time frame on that. Like how long did it take from the worst for it starting to get where both of y'all kind of saw that that y'all were going to kind of stay together and be together?
I think it was probably a couple years, and it seemed like he'd have his moments where he would try and I was like, I'm done, and then vice versa, I'd really be putting forth the effort and he wouldn't want the relationship, and I remember praying, I said, God, how do I fight for something that I don't want? Because I knew, and we went to counseling and I talked to the pastors and, we were both extremely accountable, for ourselves spiritually through the time, but I'm like, God, I don't want this relationship. And so, I had to constantly bring it back to God and have him show me how to fight and how to love and, how to trust again and things like that, so that I could get whole.
You guys got married very young. You got engaged young. You got married young. How long did it take before you realized, like, what I thought I was signing up for, I did not sign up for this?
That was the first year.
That was
right?
the first year. Like we joke about it now. We joke about it now, and I'm like, we were tricked. We were truly tricked because we did get married young. I was 19. It was 5 days before my 20th birthday. He was 23. We were both very young, very immature, very naive to what marriage is and all that goes into it. And it doesn't look like the fairy tales at all, And so when you have someone who doesn't behave the way you're expecting them to behave, and I can just speak for me, it's like, no, husbands are supposed to just know that I'm hurting and I need you, and you're supposed to come in and be the knight in shining armor. And he's like, we're out of peanut butter, and it's like he's just totally not, picking up on those cues or whatever, and it was like coming together and learning those, cues on each other. It took a long time. And so I think we struggled from the start, because we had, well, for me, I had unrealistic expectations of what a marriage would entail, so.
It was unrealistic expectations, but it was also, now that I have context, we were extremely wounded, both of us. We had pretty traumatic family lives and relationships in the past. So lots of challenges. So, yeah.
So hearing from God and hearing him say, that's your wife, that definitely makes things easier, right? Because then okay, I'm not messing around here. This is serious. But when you're young, you're in a marriage that is not a natural clicking. It's just not clicking. The expectations are off. You're both wounded. What brings you to the place where you really hear from God to start fighting for your marriage? What shifted and what did the Lord show you?
We were one of those people that were affected by the housing market in, 2008, I think it was 2009. We ended up losing our business. We lost our home. We lost our bank account. We lost our, 401k. Our dignity. We were selling off our furniture. We were selling off items in our homes. We were, playing the roulette of which bill do we pay this week. Having to choose, do we need water or do we want lights or which one's further past due? And it was just very, very humbling. A lot was stripped from us during that time. And so it made us realize, we had built a lot of our worth a lot of our validation on things that really didn't matter. And so when you have nothing, because we were literally down to having nothing, we found that we only had each other and we had to rely on each other. And we lost a lot of relationships because now, when we couldn't afford to go out shopping with the girls or go out to eat after church.
So, John, you kind of share that you got to an interesting place with God. And I think just from a friend, I think it's fair to say that sometimes the Lord has to really show us our worth in order to kind of bring even value and remind you that there's something to fight for here. And first he starts and he fights for us. What did that look like for you?
Gosh, this is also raw. Like it's bringing back memories. But, I look back now and there was a lot going on. So we were young. I mean, we were super young. We were making lots of money. We had multiple properties. We were going on these lavish vacations. And so it wasn't like we were materialistic or anything like that. It's just like we went from having, more than we needed to all of a sudden, hey, do you want to pay you want electricity or you want water?
Yeah, that's a big shift.
Huge shift. So when that happens and there's all this stress and there's all this trauma, then all of a sudden the cracks start to happen. They start to show, and you start to question, what you really value. And if you don't have God, that stuff gets exposed. And so when that happened, I still believed in God. I never didn't believe in him. He was the one that was keeping me up. But I started to see how sinful I was, how really that stuff creeps up on you. Over here in the United States, our perspective is really jacked, right? I'm blessed enough to where my dad is in the military, so we traveled all over the world. My family's from the Philippines. I got to see what real, poverty looks like. And so I knew that the world we have here in the United States is just so different. But even with that perspective, living this lifestyle, you get fooled into thinking that this is what life is about, right? And so when the houses are taken away, when you don't have food and you're worried about being able to feed your kid and stuff like that, it's just a wake-up call. And so, I no longer wanted the marriage. She didn't make me feel like a man. And it was always, you are not accomplishing this, you are not doing this. And so I was already beat down. And I guess fast forward, the point that really turned for me was I was seeing how sinful I was. And I was in my room. I remember I was on my face and I was just beat up. I haven't heard God in a long time. I mean, I prayed, I went to church, you do your Sunday thing, you do all this stuff, but you get so into the routine of life that you don't even realize that you don't have a close relationship with God. You're just doing programs. You're just doing going with the flow and doing what other people tell you to do. And so, but there I was, on my face in my master bedroom, and I was alone in the house, and I heard God audible for the first time. And here's what woke me up, because I had suicidal thoughts. Anyone who knows me knows that just doesn't compute with me. I'm like really, really positive, and I have a really hopeful view in life. So I remember those thoughts being in my head and going, whoa, this is like the bottom. It's like, I don't think like this. So even I knew that there was something wrong with that. And then I heard God audibly, and it was a long time since I heard that voice like that. And he said, "This is the John I love." And I remember being shocked. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm sinful. Like I could see that I was sinful. I could see that how much of a failure I was, and there was nothing good about me that I could see. And then I heard him say, this is the John I love. And I asked him, what are you talking about? And he said, I had to bring you to this place because you've been trying to earn my love for so long. I had to bring you to the bottom so that I could lift you back up and build you back up. And so that was a turning point for me. And, you know, was I wanting to fight for my marriage at that point? No, but I was aware enough that God was on me and that he was going to guide me to where I was at least willing to fight.
To this point, you'd built your value on properties and money and vacations and, you know, friendships. But then when those things started crumbling, you had to, it's hard to say, who are you in that time? I mean, and so I love that in that fragile place of being probably the most insecure you ever were, to say that this is the John that he loves, I think that goes for a lot of us. We think that we are beyond, past the point of no return. We kind of write ourselves off. And I love this part of your story because it really is how God sees us. Like, we don't have to impress him. He really just loves us, and he wants us to feel that, I think. And so I love this part of your story, and I love how it turns things. So what did you do in this?
Gosh, man,
well, we were in counseling.
It's all a haze for me.
I mean, we were in counseling, you know, we were trying to do the right thing as Christians. We knew, you know, that, you know, we heard all the scriptures, we know it, God hates divorce and all this stuff, but that's really hard when you're in it. And that's why, you know, my prayer was like, Lord, please, you know, show me how to fight for something I don't want, because I know you don't like this. You don't like what it does to the family. But I don't want this. So you're going to have to, you know, you're going to have to show me how to fight for something I don't want. And I remember John's prayer at the time was, Lord, I'm willing to be made willing.
Right.
And so, you know, and so we were it's like those like half-hearted apologies where your parent is like, you know, say sorry, you know, to your sibling or whatever. You're like, whatever, I'm sorry, you know, and you just kind of shrug it off, you know, you're halfway there, but that's all we had to give God at that moment. And he was like, okay, I'm going to use it. You know?
Was my prayer a lot. It was just, I said, Lord, I'm just willing to be made willing. That's it. And all these memories are coming back. I was a shell. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know what step to take. I remember thinking, I will never laugh again. I literally thought that. I said, there will never be another day that I'll laugh, you know? And I remember my pastor telling me, like, that's ridiculous, John, you're going to laugh. And I literally told him, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I really will not laugh. And I just didn't smile for long periods of time. But it just reminds me, man, like, there's just no way I could have made it through that, because there was no oomph, there was no life. And then God had to just say, like, okay, I'm here, just follow me. That's all you got to do.
Yeah.
I remember I ended up buying this journal, and it was like a gratitude journal. And every day I had to write 3 things that I was happy about and that I was grateful for. And for days I would just say, oh, I'm breathing. I woke up. You know, it's like stupid stuff like that. Well, it's not stupid, but that's all I could think of to be grateful for long periods of time.
I actually found a list that I had made, and it was so funny. Now I laugh about it because we were literally grasping for straws, you know, like the counselor was like, what do you like about each other? You know, name something good, like anything, you know, and I'm like, he's a good dresser, you know. You know,
I like his hair.
He's kind to animals, you know, like, you know, I'm like pulling for anything to be like, Yeah, you had great hair. You know,
Great hair.
You have great hair.
Let's
You
thank
know,
Jesus. Praise him.
No, but I was like, you know, like grasping for anything that positive that I could say about this man because I was just so over it, you know. And I remember we were in counseling one day and our counselor asked me a question and he said, you know, do you believe that God put you guys together? And I had to be truthful, you know, like not about my feelings, not what I, you know, wanted to say, but like, yes, I believe that God put us together. You know, there were too many confirmations up to that point. And so then he said, well, then if you believe God put you together, it's not up to you to decide when it ends. And I'm like, that was like the dagger to the heart, you know, like I did not want to hear that. I think I left angry from that counseling session, mad that I had to pay for that, you know, but it was just like, you know, but it was like one of those moments where you're just like, mic drop, you know, and it's like, okay, God, if you truly put us together, and I have to be honest and acknowledge that you put us together, otherwise I'm sinning, I'm a liar, you know, like if I acknowledge this, then it's for a reason, and you're gonna have to help me get to the point where I can be happy again.
I mean, I think it's fair. I think we all can kind of relate to doing something you're told to do, but you don't want to do it. And it feels painful to I mean, I don't know if maybe that's just me when I don't want to do it. It's like, oh, my body doesn't want to do it. No.
You know, therapy is working when you're too angry to pay for it. By the way, I'm thinking you probably don't want to show this to young people because you'll scare them away from marriage. I'm like thinking, whoa.
No, you know, honestly, I think every relationship takes effort.
Mhm.
And I think the relationship even relationships just with friends that are non-committal, those take effort and that takes energy. And, you know, that's why some people don't have those long-term relationships or friendships in their life, because it takes work to admit when you've made mistakes. It takes work to humble yourself. It takes work to explain how you feel about things. And that's not necessarily what we're taught
Right.
in our culture and many cultures. And so I can definitely appreciate how, you know, you start with this idea, and, you know, Andrea, you've shared, like, I want him to be the knight in shining armor and I want him to rescue me, and you wanted this fairy tale. And the Lord really had a very different, he had a different version of the fairy tale. I would still say you have a fairy tale because what you have is very beautiful and it stood the test of time. But the journeys and the dragons, they maybe looked a little bit different. So what brought you to the place where you said, God, show me how to fight for this marriage. Show me how you see marriage. Because I want to remind whoever's listening at this point, you were in the church, surrounded with church friends and other believers. You were under pastoral support. So you had all the right dynamics in place, but it was something very different that really kind of turned your hearts. So what?
Interesting, because and I'm wondering if this is a Western culture type of thing, but I think we want everything to be linear. Like there's this climax, like, oh my gosh, I realize I'm wrong, and now I know the right thing to do, and let's change, you know. So like for me, none of that was linear. It was 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, 10 steps forward, 20 steps back. And lots of times you think like, there's no way I'm going to make it through this. You have to remember, like when you are in the pit, your perspective is so whacked. You, like for instance, when the therapist asked me like, hey, do you think God put you together? I was so angry. I said, I don't know, like in deep down inside, I knew he put us together, but like when you're angry, you got that filter and you're in pain, you are lying to yourself. And so that's a good thing to remember for when you are in pain. Realize that your feelings are lying to you.
Right.
You're looking through this lens, and if you humble yourself, and you could fix that. You could become aware again. But there was nothing. There were events like the one I told you where I was on my face and I heard the voice of God. But even then, after that, I didn't know what to do, and then I would feel like I was winning sometimes, and then most of the time I felt like I was losing. So, and then you would have more and more, God would keep showing up, and he would give you what you need. He'd breathe into your spirit again. He'd breathe into your soul, and you move as much as you can until you can't move anymore. And then he breathes in you again, and then you move a little more. And then you look back like 5 years later and you go, whoa, how did I make it over here?
Talk to us a little bit about covenant and what God started showing you and teaching you about covenant in what we can say, I'll label it the recovery process, right?
So that's a loaded question that you asked, because I would say there are not even a handful. There are just maybe 2 or 3 things that God imparted to me that changed the paradigm of how I view the world and my relationships. Covenant is definitely one of them, but it didn't start with marriage. It actually started when I got, even after I got saved. What the audience doesn't know, because I didn't tell you yet, was that I was raised in a very, very traumatic family and was abused for most of my life. And it scarred me so much that when I got saved, I kept thinking that God was going to take back salvation. And so for at least 2 years, I went every Sunday to the altar call. And it wasn't until someone stopped me like years later saying, why do you keep going? Why do you keep going to the altar call? Didn't you accept Jesus already? And no one had ever asked me that before. And I was like, we're not supposed to do this? He's going to take it away, like I got to make sure that I'm right. So that was the first inkling into where I realized that there was something wrong with me. And eventually the pain was so much, like I would literally stay up at night thinking, God, please don't abandon me. Please, I want to make it to heaven. I want to, like I'll do whatever I have to do, and then I started studying covenant. I don't even know where I heard of that term. I don't know how I got to it, but I wanted to study it. So let me explain what covenant and contract means. So over here in the United States, we're a very contract-based culture. We have no idea what covenant even means. You may think you know the definition, but you know what? We're not living like covenant. We're not relating. Covenant is really a relationship, right? For instance, I met I had a friend who was from Africa, and he wanted to do business with me. And he said, hey, I got these, my friends in Africa, and they could get us these supplies and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, cool, let's get a contract. And he was like, what are you talking about? He said, they told me they were going to give it to me. And I was like, I thought he was a fool. I was like, there's no way I'm going to do business with you. And I never got into the deal because I was just like, this guy is going to get scammed. But later, as I studied covenant, I started to realize, oh my gosh, like we in the Western culture so mistrust one another that we do contracts and we don't feel safe unless we have a contract. And so a contract is based on, I don't trust you, you don't trust me. Let's put on paper, if you hurt me, I'm going to come after you, and vice versa. Covenant, totally different. You don't start a covenant until there is trust. And if you look in the Bible, it was based on covenant. In fact, the Bible is a collection of covenants. You have the Mosaic covenant, Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant, you have the new covenant, right? And so covenant is a promise. It's more than a promise. It's, I don't even know if we have definitions for it, but basically once you enter into a covenant, you're locked. That's it. And that's why there's blood shed when you do a covenant, because you're basically saying, until I die, even if this kills me, I'm going to make sure that I do my part, which is what Jesus did when he entered into covenant. He said, even if this kills me, I'm going to be there for you. And so that concept is totally different than what we're taught here in the United States. And that is what it took for me to realize that God wasn't going to leave me. You know, I could have bad breath. I could have like not take a shower, and I could be the ugliest version of myself, and he still loved me. In fact, when I was like I told you earlier, I was on my face, sinful. You know, at that point, I was lusting. Be raw here, right? I was lusting after other girls. I didn't want her, and I knew it, and he still loved me. I was like, it would confuse me when he said that. I was like, you know, this, like, you love, this is the one you love, you know? So that's covenant.
You know, there's a lot about your testimony that is encouraging, but I love that not only did he do that with you one-on-one, but he did that within your marriage. Like, he gave you the idea that I love you no matter what, no matter how low you get, John, no matter how low you get, Andrea, I still love you. But then he also like, in the way that he loved you, it almost was helped you love each other.
Yeah.
Again. Like, I mean, I love, like, I'm willing to be willing. Like, I'm like, I want to do it. I want to do it. I mean, those are real, you know, if you haven't gotten to that place in your life in any area, that is a real moment where you're like, I really want to be able to do the right thing, but I don't know how, and I just can't. And especially when in marriage, I think it's so easy to say, I just don't want this anymore. And
well, that example, like, it taught me like to love that way. You know, so at that point, you know, it's as I was growing in this covenant love, I was able to look at her and I go, man, you hurt me so bad. There were so many things you did wrong, but you know, I'm not going to look at that. You know, I'm going to look at the covenant that I made. I'm going to look, like I said, I'm going to be there.
Right.
At your ugliest. It enabled me to forgive.
Right. And there was, for me, you know, a freedom in recognizing that, you know, God, you love me in the midst of all my ugliness and all my failures, and, you know, that you see me as valuable in the midst of that. It wasn't based on how much was in the bank account or what vacation we took or how many pieces of rental property we had. It was because you say I'm valuable. And that was just so liberating, that I didn't have to put on a front. I didn't have to be anything, you know, because in all truthfulness, you know, I'm not a shopper. I don't like doing certain things. And it's like, I felt like I was having to do these things to fit in with the crowd, and to suddenly not have the money, one, to do them. And God saying, I don't care about any of that anyways, you know. It was so freeing. And then to know, like, okay, this is the commitment that I made, you know. And I don't think when we got married, we understood covenant. You know, we just, I think we kind of did look at it like a contract, you know. We signed the marriage license, and this is what you do. And, you know, we didn't quite understand the commitment level that we had agreed upon. But then when I went back and I actually, like, looked at the vows that I had made and, like, understood, like, what a vow was, I was like, okay, God, you know, I did some, you know, I made some commitments here that I need your help in abiding by, you know.
When you're living in a contract world and you're relating to people in a contract view, you're always going to look what other people aren't doing. You're always going to look at they're not holding on their part of the bargain. And that it's impossible. It's impossible to enter into the God kind of love. And you hear all this stuff, love is love is love. It's not true. There's so many, the Bible clearly says there's so many different types of love. There's actually different words for different types of love. And it even says that you could love sin. And so I honestly believe it's impossible for us to experience the love that we were created to receive unless you experience the God kind of love.
Right.
And that's just a totally, totally different, supernatural, you can't do it on your own type of love. So
yeah, and I think, the fact that you made a good point of, when you're busy looking at the other person and like, you failed me and this is our problem is because of you, you're not taking ownership. And I think, the way that God did it, he, worked on us individually, but then he worked on us together and joined us, and I think we both got to the place where we quit looking at the other person as the reason, and we just tried working on ourselves. And by working on ourselves, and really, it's not that like, oh, if we're in a marriage and everybody needs to be doing 50-50 and, and it's like, and we quit looking at it that way. It's like, no, I'm giving 100% to this relationship because I made a commitment. I made a vow. And that's why vows are so important. The Bible says, like, don't swear by the sun and the moon, and don't, put these words out there hastily, because when you make a vow and you make that covenant, you are locked into it. We literally said, till death do us part, not till you don't please me anymore. It's till, death do us part. It got to the point where we realized, because so many things had been stripped away, that all we had was each other. And I was like, okay, God, I don't know what you're going to do here. I know that, your word says that you make all things together for our good, and you give us beauty for ashes, and you joy for mourning and all this stuff. And I quoted those things back to him. And I'm like, I know you're going to flip this the way that only you can. And I mean, to this day, I couldn't tell you how I got from one place to the other, because in the midst of it, it felt so heavy and so hopeless. But God, we took it one day at a time. And then when we realized, we didn't have the friends, we didn't have the relationships we once did, we couldn't go and do those things, we started relying on each other, and we realized we're a pretty good team, and then healing came, and we got very crafty and savvy with how we did things. And like our daughter, we talked to her years later, and she's like, oh, I never knew we were struggling, and we're like, that like warmed our hearts so much, because like literally we're playing, bill roulette, which one do we pay? And she had no clue any of these things were going on because of things that we did to make her feel special. And it was like, by joining together, we're able to make our family so much stronger. And like now we have a confidence in us because our value is not relying on the numbers in the bank account or any of that, it's relying on who God says we are. And we know that we're in it for the long haul.
Amen. There's room to heal.
There's room to heal. Yeah, absolutely.
So in this time of COVID, unfortunately, there's been a lot of divorce, from forced close quartering with the one that you love the most. But share a word of encouragement to maybe that couple who is really ready to give up. I mean, what would you say to that couple who is, I don't want to fight for this, I don't want this?
Well, I would say don't make a hasty decision, in the midst of a stressful situation, because God can work it out. And I will say that, in the beginning of our relationship, pre all of this, the problems, we were very codependent. We could not do anything without each other, and now we both know that's extremely unhealthy, I think it's important to have your own, your own hobbies and, friends. And, like I go out with the girls still and, things like that. And there is a thing of too much togetherness, like we take our separate time. Like, you want to watch that TV show? I'm going in the bedroom and watching this TV show. And it's okay to do separate things, you're individuals as well as a couple. So
I think that's key. Identity. You have to have your own identity. Remember that God died for you.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't die for the couple. He died. God so loved you, and he wants a personal relationship with you. And I think if you don't have that identity and individual relationship with God, it's going to be really, really hard for you to navigate things and to make wise decisions. Another thing is you have to have an individual relationship with God.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no other way around it. I would not have made it if I didn't have that individual relationship with God. Because I remember when we went to the therapist and he asked me the same 3 questions that he asked her. I think the first one was, do you believe God put you together? And I think my answer was, I don't know, because I was so angry. The second question was, do you want this marriage? And my answer was no. And then the third question, the final question is, okay, then do you care about your testimony and what you told God? And that's what smacked me.
Mm.
Like, if you don't have a relationship with God, you're not going to care about that.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have that anchor, and you have to be the one to be honest with yourself, about what really is important. And
That's awesome. I think we have done in our fair share of marriage counseling and ministering to other couples. So often we both can hear that it's really the individual needs to focus on, the wife needs to focus on herself and the husband needs to focus on himself. And so often they have memorized and fixated what the other has done to them, but they couldn't say like what their role in it was. And we are to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. And that's my salvation. I have to work it out for myself. But if I'm not even focused on what I'm doing and I'm just focused on what's being done to me, I'm never going to get to that place. So I really can appreciate what you're sharing about. You need to work out your relationship directly with the Lord, and you're an individual. It's good.
And even in that, there were times where, we had both agreed, like, okay, we're not gonna hang on to things. We're not gonna hold grudges. Like, I won't go as far and say like, oh, don't let the sun go down on your fighting and make sure you resolve it. Yeah, we tried that. And there were some times where like it just escalated from there, like sometimes we needed to go our separate ways for the night, and then we could come back and we could talk about it the next day when we were both more calm, And so you have to be aware of the timing of when and how you communicate, but I had really committed, I'm not gonna hold grudges, I'm just really gonna try to let it go the best I can. But there were times where I was really hurt, and I'd say, God, I need an apology. I really need an apology. I need you to talk to him because I'm hurt, and God would always talk to him, because I'm like, Lord, I know he's a praying man. I know he wants to hear from you. I know he wants to be obedient to you. I need an apology in this, I wasn't wrong, and so God always, every single time when I had that request, he always came to me and he always dealt with him, and it wasn't, I didn't pull that card all the time, because I knew I can contribute some junk to an argument, just as good. But there were times where I'm like, Lord, I need you to step in here because I'm hurt.
And without that relationship with the Lord, we don't get to call him in to the equation, right?
So, there's this meme. Sorry, I got to do like one joke that kind of like offends people. It wouldn't be me. But so there's this meme, and I thought it was hilarious because it talks about this fish, and when the the female and the male mate, the male actually infuses into the body of the female and then loses itself, and then it's just the female, but the female like took the qualities of the male and it's just one organism. And I'm like, wow, I know a bunch of couples like that. But I honestly believe that it's going to be really hard for the marriage relationship to reach what God intended, the glory. In the New Testament, it said that marriage is the mystery of Christ's relationship with the church. Like there is a mystery there there's something we haven't seen yet. There's a promise there. It's going to be hard to reach that, to get the glory and to get the reward if you're not an individual. Like if you just infuse into your spouse, how's God going to direct you? Like if you don't have that individual relationship, like I believe romance is important to God. I believe that a relationship is important to God, but all of that takes creativity. And if you're like just doing what your spouse said and you're not questioning things and you're not like creating things, how is that going to happen? And so, yes, I believe individuality and relationship with God.
Amen. Well, John and Andrea, we thank you so much for this conversation. Thanks for sharing a little bit about your personal testimony. And I do pray that it encourages someone that you can never be too far. You can never not like each other that much where God cannot bring you back into loving covenant relationship. Because once you say I do, you're in a covenant relationship, but in a loving covenant relationship. So thank you for sharing. And we do have some teaching that we are going to put some notes together. So for those who are watching, we are hoping to put together a study about covenant to help give you a better understanding about why covenant is so important. So be on the lookout for John to help put that together for us. I'm
Putting
calling
it in
him
the
out.
atmosphere.
Yeah.
About this now.
So thank you for listening.
Yes.
Thank you for watching Adventures in One Love. God bless you.
God bless you guys.
Bye, everyone.